Okay, let's call the meeting of the Richmond City Council for the General Purposes Committee meeting for Tuesday, November 8th, 2022 to order. Just before I go to the minutes, I just want to remind everybody we've still got a semi-hybrid or a semi-virtual meeting here. So as you want to speak, don't use the pad in front of you, just use the Zoom feature, okay? And then we'll keep track of who wants to speak first. Okay, may I have a motion on the minutes? Moved and seconded, discussion, all those in favor, post carried, and the community energy, et cetera, the funding opportunity. Peter, anything to add to your report?
Mr. Chair.
I'll move the recommendation, thanks.
Okay, so it's moved, is it seconded? Seconded. Councillor Wolf.
Through your worship to staff, the question is about the other 8 strategic directions of SEEP. And I know what we're talking about today is allocation from a funding source, so there's no financial impact. But potentially would staff be bringing to the budgetary process coming up additional levels of request for support of the other SEEP strategic directions that might have tax impact? Like, is that something that staff, if they deem necessary or to enhance our work, that staff would bring that forward? As like at the end of the budget approval process, there's like extra areas where we could make improvements and add in, or do we need to give direction?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, not at this time. The request remains on these 2 new positions that would come forth through the operating budget as one-time additionals for a 3-year period. Okay. Staff have assessed broadly the SEEP actions, and this funding allocation here and the residual funding that's not used, the $240K annually, would be used for analysis to support those initiatives and other initiatives in the SEEP.
Thank you. Just one follow-up question then. Through your worship to staff about in the report in italics, it says major move strategies. Is there a report or more details on what's been identified as the major move strategies?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, yes, the first 3 strategies, so retrofit existing buildings, zero carbon mobility, and zero carbon new construction were identified as the major moves.
That's it. Thanks.
All right, Councillor Liu.
Worship, through you to staff, thank you for this report. It went into a lot of detail, especially back into the individual directions. Just out of curiosity, do any of the schools have EV charging, and are we working with the school board on that? It seems to me they're a pretty major employer with lots of people moving around.
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, I'm not certain of the exact charging infrastructure they have. That said, some of our joint facilities do share EVs, chargers that we did install, so we worked with them for, if it was on their land, for instance, we worked with them to get that permission. So in some cases we do. I'd have to look into more details to find out more information.
Okay, thank you. And then further to that, when it talks about the alternate transportation, bikes and better bike racks, and would those then be having e-bike charging facilities? Because I know we still have the pilot program over at the Minooz Center for Active Living on that secure bike facility, and does such things then offer electric bike charging facilities with those once we figure that out?
Through the chair to Councillor, we are looking into that. We have looked at it when we installed the level 2 chargers most recently, the cost of running the wiring, etc. But we continue to look at that as an opportunity.
Thank you.
Councillor Day.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, I see on page GP 11 that 2 new temporary full-time positions for 2023, 2024, and 2025 will be fully funded by the Provincial Local Government Climate Action Program. So that $325,000, if we divide that by the 3 years by 6, is it approximately $54,000 per person for each one of those positions?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, it's noted on page 10, the previous page, the actual cost for the staffing.
Yeah. Oh, I see, because we're subsidized.
Yeah, so that would be covering 2 staff positions. which would include benefits, et cetera.
Okay, so that's for both of them,
total
okay.
cost.
Yeah, because it seemed a little low, and I thought, who are we getting? Okay, thank you for clarifying that for me. Thanks.
All right, we'll call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Brings us to the council and committee meeting schedule. Claudia, anything to add to your report?
Nothing, your worship.
Move the recommendation.
Moved and seconded. The one thing I want to note, which is, I mean, it's obvious, but I just think it's worth mentioning, is that by going to the second week, basically, of January, GP starts on the 9th, we're giving up the fifth Monday. For the newcomers, 3 times a year, we get a fifth Monday. It's really valuable. We try not to fill it with anything. So we actually, for staff and for us, we actually get some time away. So if you support this, which I do, but if you support it, we're giving up that fifth Monday, and we'll have a council meeting that fifth Monday of January. I think it's worth it, but just make sure you note it. Councillor Day.
Now, thank you very much to the chair, to staff. I note that the LMGA retreat, which is I think it's in Nanaimo, is on June 13th to 15th. And we still have a GP and DP on those days. Community safety meeting. If a bunch of councillors want to go to the LMGA on June 13th, could we move the Community Safety Committee meeting from the 13th of June to the 7th of June, if that becomes an issue?
Well, we'll know closer to the time whether it can be done, or how many people are wanting to go there, and the chair of the committee can just make that change. We don't need a council resolution for that. I will say, though, that historically, maybe 1 or 2 councillors have gone to that. It's not a heavily attended thing like UBCM is, or even FCM. So, with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. And we are now adjourned, and I'll go into, let's reorganize. I'll go into Finance Committee. And just before I call to order the Finance Committee, I'll just mention for the benefit of the newcomers to council, what I do, my usual practice is to ask staff if they have anything to add to their report. The assumption is that we have all read those reports and we don't need staff to summarize it. Now, there can be an exception to that for some reason. Probably when we go to the utility budget, we're going to have more of an examination by staff to set the tone. But that generally is how we approach it. All right, I'll call to order the meeting, the Finance Committee meeting. May I have a motion on the minutes? Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor, post carried. Establishment of the new utility reserve funds. Cindy, is there anything to add to your report?
Nothing to add, your worship.
I'm sorry? Yeah, Councilor McNulty.
Yeah, thanks very much. A great report. I have no problem with the report and the establishment of the funds. I guess the only thing that I have, and it'll come up a bit later, when we do our taxes, we send out our notice for utilities and stuff, whether we can have a line in there which would have flood protection on it, so people know that we are contributing and they are contributing.
Let's ask that when we get to the utility budget.
Okay, all right, I just thought I'd bring it up now that we're gonna establish that as a fund, and it should be brought up that we make sure we have it there. Okay, I'll do it then.
Councilor Day.
Thank you very much. To staff through the chair, I just want to say, I think these new names are really great. They are much easier to understand for the public, and it's going to make it a lot easier for us to do our job and explain it. So thanks for ramping them up.
Did I get a motion on that? Moved and seconded. Further discussion? All those in favor, opposed, carried. Turning to the district energy utility rates, Alan Postolka. Alan, what do you want to tell us about this?
Your worship, I have nothing to add to the.
So the rates are remaining competitive with non-district energy rates.
That's correct. The rate stays competitive, even lower than business as usual rates, and they are high enough to recover all costs without impact on any taxpayers in the city of Richmond.
Okay, someone want to move it? Move the recommendation. Moved and seconded. Comments, questions? Councillor Day.
The Chair, I noticed on FIN 21, the 2023 rate increase for commercial is 6.5% and residential 1%. Is the commercial rate normally much higher than the residential rate?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, commercial rates are usually lower in ADU. They're lower than residential rates.
They're usually lower.
Yes.
So we're making up for lost income? Is that why?
No, this rate is increase is higher than residential because of the type of energy that we are using there. The technology uses more electricity and natural gas than geo-exchange technology. So in that case.
Okay, good. Well, thank you for that.
Councillor Heed.
Yes, through the chair to the member or to the staff. Just for my information, so I have a clearer picture, as you can recognize, I'm new to this. If these buildings that are under these district energy utility geographic locations, do they have the ability to go to another supplier such as Fortis? Or are they bound by this based on their geographic location and how they've outfitted their buildings?
To your worship, to Councillor Heed, typically City Council would endorse the service area for certain geographical area, and all new buildings within the area would have to connect to district energy system, unless there is a specific exemptions that it's made by City Council.
So through the chair, my question is, how does it compare? I know the mayor made comment about with respect to it being within line with others. How does this compare, for example, to generally a similar building, if it can be used to use that in comparison, the rate for that and the increased rate for that building compared to that? I know you give some general forecast based on a blended formula for Hydro and Fortis, but can we define that a little further?
Through your worship to Councillor Heath. Actually, we did prepared some information. So typically, users of district energy would pay, typical unit of 900 square feet would pay $94 per month, where if they would have conventional natural gas with electricity or electricity combined system, they would pay $97 per square foot.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, anyone else? All right, we've got the motion on the floor. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? That is carried. So then we get to the utility rates and budgets. Now, just as staff comes up, what I normally do, or what we normally do here, is that we'll get any general comments from staff, and then we'll go through the budgets in the order that they're presented in the report, and we'll just focus on one, then the next, the next, and the next. And ultimately, we'll get a resolution on the floor. So why don't we start off with our staff introducing yourselves and giving us any general comments you've got, and then we'll get right into the first budget.
Thank you, Your Worship. My name is Melissa Shao. I'm the Manager of Financial Planning and Analysis here, overseeing all the budgets for the city. We're here today to present the utility budget to you. Yes.
Now he's going to introduce
Okay,
himself.
thank you.
Milton Chan, Director of Engineering.
And Suzanne Bycraft, Director of Public Works Operations.
Listen.
Thank you. So today we're presenting the utility budget rates to you. From myself, I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that we're doing a little bit differently this year, if that's okay to start with, a little bit differently than has been done typically in the past. So the first is regarding Metro Vancouver sewer debt levy. This is a separate levy that we collect for Metro Vancouver. Yes,
Melissa, I'm gonna ask you to hold that till we
Okay.
get to the sewer.
sure, okay.
But do you have just any overall comments, any of you?
We have nothing to add to our report, so.
Okay.
just- yeah.
So this, again, for the newcomers, so this budget and the rates, they will end up as the utility budget, and there's a billing, and when is the billing sent out, roughly?
Mr. Chair, the rates we request the rates be set by the end of this year in order that the invoices can be, or the rates are in effect for January 2023. And then they are sent out in the first quarter, usually of 2020, of the new year.
Okay.
For people on meters, they're issued quarterly.
Okay, fair enough. So if you don't have any more general comments, why don't we just head into the first one, which is, I think the first one is water. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
Okay,
Okay, so Mr. Chair, on FIN 49 are the three options for water. The first option includes all of the non-discretionary increases, and that includes a 1% increase to support the multifamily water metering program. Option 1 also includes a request for 3 regular full-time staff. Right now, the funding for these positions is in the budget, however, it is temporary full-time, so this request is to formalize those as regular full-time positions. Option 2 includes all of the items in option 1, plus a $350,000 reduction in the rate stabilization. And option 3, similar to option 2, includes all the items from option 1 and complete removal of rate stabilization. And the reason for the removal is because Metro Vancouver right now is projecting some very large increases in the future, so we want to preserve the ability to absorb some of those increases.
all right, so on rate stabilization, to elaborate, so the first option would have $700,000 coming in from our reserve fund into this to slightly lower the rates for the users, right?
Yes.
Okay, and option 2 says, take that in half to 350, and if we go the recommended option 3, then don't use any rate stabilization at all.
Correct.
So obviously, I guess your rationale is that the rates were okay this year, and we don't need that stabilization, better to save it for another year.
That's correct.
Now, in terms of the 1% increase for the multifamily water metering program, again, to clarify that, we have 100% water meters for residential and also for industrial, commercial, and institutional, right? So it's 100% water metered. And that's the result of past programs. But where we're lacking is the multifamily, which is somewhere in the 50s or something like that. 50% of them have the water meter programs. So what we've been doing is subsidizing it, or we've set up funds, and where will we see those funds? In the operating budget?
No, there's a capital submission.
Okay, in the capital budget, which will come eventually, you'll see that we'll put money into any strata corporation, any strata complex can apply to get some funding to alleviate some of the costs that they're going to incur in going to the water metering program, because we want to encourage that. So in option 1, we're increasing the usual amount by 1%, right?
Correct.
I'm sorry, the amount doesn't increase by 1%. We're taking 1% of the budget, we're adding it in here.
Yes.
Okay. And so then option 2, we're reducing the rate stabilization, and then option 3, we just remove it altogether. And there's no rate stabilization, and you're recommending option 3.
Yes.
Okay. So based on that, any questions from anybody? Okay, I've got Councillor McNulty, then Councillor Hobbs.
Just a simple question.
Just hang on.
On the rate stabilization, there's $700,000 in there, right? Approximately? How much is in the stabilization fund?
Oh, no, 14 million or
Yeah, the
something.
provision is about
14.
14.9 million right now.
We don't spend 14.9 million at one time. We apportion each year. Given Metro Vancouver, the tremendous increases that are coming in the next 5 years, when people see this, it's going to be blown out of their minds on it. Do we have a projection of what we could possibly do for our budget in the 5-year plan to say, this year we're going to put $700,000 in, when it's, 12.8% or 13%, we're going to put 850,000, et cetera. Have we projected down the road to minimize it? Because the water bill, this year is palatable, and I support what staff have come with. I don't know how we're going to do this next year, the year after, and the year after, given our figures.
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, we take a look at this every year. Metro always provides 5-year projections. They tend to change a fair amount from year to year. So we don't do a detailed 5-year balancing just because we do expect the rates to change. But next year we will look at what the projected increases are for that year and provide a recommendation on rate stabilization at that point.
Well, I think it's important for us too to understand that as we go through. Thank you.
Mr. Irving wants to make a note.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Just to add further to that, certainly our primary strategy for controlling Metro Vancouver costs on the water utility is the water metering program, which has been very successful over the years. And with the mandatory single-family program and moving with multifamily, we're managing to reduce or maintain our overall consumption while we have community growth. And Metro Vancouver charges us for every cubic meter of water we consume. So when we avoid that consumption and reduce it and put people on meters, we're saving money for everybody. So as Metro Vancouver goes through some of these very significant increases they're projecting in the future, our main objective, other than managing them as best we can, is managing our own consumption, which reduces the charges that come to us.
Okay, good, thank you.
All right, Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you, and through the chair, well, that's a good point, consumption and volume versus what we end up paying. I will be supporting the recommended option that you proposed and not subsidizing this year, because looking forward at the projections that are in the report, and it's important for the public to realize we don't control that cost, strictly speaking, other than consumption and containing what we actually use. And I believe, just a quick question to staff, we do get a cost saving and reduction when we do control the volume that we consume, correct? And there is a note in the report that we've all talked about before that our population since 2003 has gone up 26% and our water consumption has gone down 12%, right? So that's very good. So one question to staff is, there is an actual dollar cost saving when we reduce our consumption. I think you just said that. And another question would be, why are these astronomical increases happening through Metro Vancouver? I know there's a reason, but what other cities are on water meters, and how much of the cost of Metro Vancouver is due to the fact that not all cities are being, I'll say, as diligent as Richmond has been in metering single-family homes, and we're getting into multifamily homes, as the mayor has pointed out. I'll leave it at that question for now, if you caught that.
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, where Richmond would end up paying for the regional usage is if the other communities don't have conservation programs, and then Metro would need to have very expensive upgrades to the water supply and treatment system. That's where we would be impacted by that. What we have seen is that metering does promote conservation. The stance of some of the communities is that metering is not directly related to it. So that's where the discussions come up and the arguments come up versus the various municipalities on what is the best way to promote conservation. Is it metering, or is it through other programs that aren't directly linked to having people pay for exactly what they use?
Sure, and just a quick comment if I could through the chair. So, I mean, I think these costs in the report, I think it said it's gone up 198% since 2006, and Richmond's kind of equivalent costs have gone up about 49%. So when we start talking about the rate increases, it is worth noting from a public point of view that Richmond itself, to the extent it can be, has been quite diligent in controlling the costs. I think it's been about 1.7% per year in the last 4 years for Richmond itself. But some of these costs are just not, strictly speaking, within our control, and we do have to pay for what we consume. So hence the increase. And I think it is prudent to not do the subsidy this year and to save it for the next years, because when you look at those, and everybody has looked at it, but for people that are just listening, we're looking at some double-digit increases projected over the next 5 years. And this year looks pretty reasonable compared to, or next year looks pretty reasonable compared to what's coming down the pipe, pun intended, down the road. So thank you very much. It was a great report.
Okay, Councillor Galanders?
Thank you, Mayor Brody. I think Councillor Hobbs just answered most of my questions. I just wanted to know, so about the 700,000 option for rate stabilization provision, that's coming out of a $14.9 million fund. Is that fund just for rate stabilization, or do we also use it to safeguard ourselves against other unforeseen things?
The water provision can be used for rate stabilization as well as one-time costs associated with the water utility.
Okay, so if there's 14.9 million in there, that could be like 21 years worth of $700,000 rate stabilizations.
Unless there's some one-time costs.
A one-time
that would
cost.
be significant that we need to fund, yes.
And we're earmarking for that to be something coming down the line soon?
We always like to plan to be conservative and ensure that we're prepared for the future.
Okay, and then as far as just the report goes, I'm looking at the bottom lines, but I don't see exactly what exact difference it would make to somebody's bill. Can you just simplify that for me?
Through the chair to Councillor Galanders, on page FIN 54, there's a separate table that shows estimated costs based on household usage for metered customers. So that's table 4. And then table 5 is the cost impact for flat rate customers.
Okay, yeah, because when you see it like that, an option of 3.9% to 5.5 seems significant to me, but.
All right, we'll go to Councillor Day.
Thank you very much. Sorry, all of a sudden this is low. So my question is, we know these increases are coming from Metro Vancouver over the next 5 years. Are they due to infrastructure upgrades that Metro is doing to allow for more water sources?
Excuse me. To the chair to Councillor Day, it's a combination of capital upgrades and operation maintenance costs. The Metro typically doesn't provide a fine detailed breakdown, but normally the larger increases are based of capital upgrades that they were planning on doing.
So we're not going to keep seeing these increases every 5-year period. At some point, cost of living is one thing, but these huge increases that we're seeing, we're not going to continue to see that because they're trying to address it, is what we're hoping?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, unfortunately, we don't control Metro's long-term planning. We have requested that they provide a little bit more robust long-term projections to better help us in our planning for the future as well.
Okay, and my last question is, obviously we're encouraging people to be metered, so the report chart that you provide on page 54 is excellent, which shows that a single-family dwelling will pay $24.11 more under option 3. Is there a way for staff to provide a chart that how that would compare to other cities? So when someone goes, whoa, it's up this much money, yeah, but in Delta they're paying $50, or in Burnaby they're paying $40. It'd be nice to provide that information for the public.
To the chair to Councillor Day, we could collate that information and provide it.
That'd be great, thank you.
Councillor Howe.
Well, my question is actually related to Councillor Day's question. Now, we understand that we have no control over the Metro's budget, but what kind of impact or what kind of input do we have, in helping them or trying to make the increase more controllable? I mean, we cannot just allow them just a free hand to do whatever they want to do, and then we are at the receiving end of whatever impact.
Through the chair to Councillor Al, at the staff level, we do liaise with Metro Vancouver through various subcommittees and staff meetings. And we do request that they be mindful of what capital projects and what sort of upgrades that they do. Unfortunately, Richmond, as one out of a number of municipalities, we have somewhat limited influence on the overall decision-making processes at Metro Vancouver.
Okay.
So as a board member, you're going to have direct input into that process. And staff has input as well. The other thing I'll just say is, as the chair of the Water Committee of Metro Vancouver for the past 4 years, I've talked about water meters till I'm blue in the face. The cities that have it think it's great. The cities that don't have it will make endless excuses not to have it. So you can tell me why. Councillor Heed.
Through the chair, my question relates to, it's a consistent question when we go through all of these separately, is related to the staff increases. And some you have temporary full-time people working and you want to stabilize those positions somehow. Total costs, and I don't know, Chair, if this is too early to ask the total cost of all the staff increases that we would be going forward with this particular year if we went with this utility increase.
As, you mean, are you talking about the operating budget or this budget?
This budget, as it
Well,
relates to the
we've got
utility
the
increase.
costs. The costs are in the report, are they not? So why don't you, as we go through each of these sections, just highlight what the costs are and tell us where it is in the report.
Mr. Chair, the cost for those positions that we're requesting, it is work that's already being done. So it is already reflected in the budget that is presented before you. It will be covered through any of the operating expenditures or through the capital, because the work control technicians that are referenced here do perform different sorts of roles in those various areas. So the funding for the positions is already in place. It's just we have temporary staff performing those roles.
So that's for this group of 3.
Correct.
So they will see a change in another report to take that out?
Mr. Chair, no, it won't be a removal. It's that the work's being done, so the staff do need to be paid today for the work that they're performing. All we're asking to do is formalize those roles into full-time positions.
So through the chair, this relates to, you've costed that in each of these options, correct? Starting with option 1, 2, and your recommended option 3. So now, with it being in the operating costs, as the chair is explaining, where is the difference? If now this is part of a utility increase based on the percentage here of 5.5% on the option 3, where is that somehow reduced if we're already paying that out for a operational budget?
Through the chair to Councillor Heed, to clarify, it is just formalizing positions. It is not requesting additional money. The money is already in the budget currently at the base level. We just have people performing their work on a temporary role, and we're wanting to make them full-time. It is not a cost increase or a decrease elsewhere.
Okay, so through the chair, my only concern is here, why are we even adding that into an option then?
Isn't it council policy that any increases in staff have to be council approved?
Correct.
So that's what you're doing, is saying you're asking for that approval.
Mr. Chair, that is correct.
Thank you, Chair.
Now, it'll get more complicated when we get a little farther along. All right, anything else on the water? Okay, let's turn to sewer. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one more question. I just want to get an understanding of, because this is my first time seeing it. So at what point, like what amount of a rate increase would you usually consider the subsidy?
Through the chair to Councillor Gillen, there's no set answer to that. We need to look at the 5-year projections of where internally our costs are going to be, where the external costs are going to be. So there's no set target for rate stabilization.
Isn't it part science and part art? You just kind of know when you need it, when you see it?
Yes.
So your professional judgment is, we can get by without it this year?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, going to the sewer utility.
So on Fin 56 is the summary of the options. Option 1 is only the non-discretionary increases. Option 2 is the non-discretionary increases plus a zero net cost sewer coordinator. This, similar to the work control technicians, there's no additional funding being requested for this position. This is work that's being done off the side of people's desks. So having a person in this role full-time would help create savings in maintenance and more proactive capital planning. And the other item in option 2 is a $250,000 increase to the contribution to the sewer reserve, and this is for the capital program for sewer projects. Option 3 is option 1 plus the sewer coordinator plus a $500,000 increase to the capital program instead of a $250,000 increase as shown in option 2.
Okay, so we'll get into questions on this, but as I understand this, $250,000 in option 2 and then $500,000 in option 3, there was a previous report, this is on page 59, I think, that it was identified that we needed to get far more into the reserve for long-term maintenance and replacement. And so this is just, if we support option 3, we're putting in $500,000. If you support option 2, it's $250,000. And option 1, you're not putting any extra money into it.
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
That's about it? Okay, so Councillor Liu.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for this report. Now, just out of curiosity, if people are on the metered rate, then it's based on their water consumption for the sewer. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, does that also apply to agricultural properties? So if you're an agricultural user and you're watering your fields, but you're also on a septic system because you're on farmland?
Through the Councillor Liu, if the person doesn't have sanitary service, they wouldn't be charged sanitary services. So in the case if a house is purely on septic or property is purely on septic and is not serviced by the sanitary utility, they would not be charged a sanitary fee.
Okay. Now, if they are on the sewer and they are watering a farm, is there a number that they max out at for, say, the sewer?
Through the chair to
Does that make
Councillor
sense?
Liu,
Like,
yes.
or could we create such a system?
I believe there is, but I'll have to take a look at it and get back to you on that one.
Okay, thanks. And if you could also maybe just show some numbers of what that would look like if we were to cap it for the properties that.
Actually, I could defer that question to Mike Ching, the manager of revenue.
Please come forward so we can hear you through the microphone.
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, the farmlands, they would typically have an irrigation meter, which therefore it's a separate metering, which is not going to be charged a sewer.
So they're not charged on the sewer?
No,
So it's separate?
not on the separate irrigation meter.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you, and through the chair, well, a couple of the same points loom large here as well, the role of Metro Vancouver and the increases that are forthcoming. First of all, I do support the option with the 0.5 million or 0.5 to reserves, because I think that is important, and I think Richmond has benefited from having healthy reserves for different aspects of running the city. The other point I just wanted to make is moving it from property taxes to, I think, sewer utility, I think is what you're talking about. When I read that, I thought, that makes sense, because I might have been one of the phone calls you got last year saying, what's with this? And so it was explained to me. So that actually sounds really reasonable to me. I guess the global question, it's not really fair, because when you look at the projected increases, again, they're quite large. And so it's maybe a little bit rhetorical, but like, is there any light at the end of the Metro Vancouver tunnel when it comes to these increases? Because it seems like the projects in particular are just getting more numerous and bigger, and there's reasons for that, I think. But and I think Councillor McNulty kind of brought this up too. Is there, pardon?
I'm on liquid waste.
Oh, okay. So is there a projected timeline where perhaps we're getting through some of these major projects and that the
Can I
increases will?
address that, please? The answer is no. You will be taken aback if you look to the 5-year projections right across Metro Vancouver. And I can tell you that as we approved the budget at the last meeting of the last board, there were a number of comments about how, this is number one to get this in hand to be able to control the future expenditure increases. Everything we're talking about here, maintenance is one thing, but every time you're talking about capital for any of these utilities at Metro Vancouver, you're not talking about a little pipe. You're talking about something 8 feet around, and it's going for a couple miles. It's that level of expenditure. So the answer is no. And it goes back to the previous point. Don't spend our money stabilizing when we've got what we think we've got coming up.
No, I think that's a good point, and I think a couple of people have commented on it. I do question the sustainability of these kind of increases over time, notwithstanding all the great projects that are happening. There is only one taxpayer, as people like to say, and these are significant increases coming up, and people should understand when they're listening that we're doing the best we can to balance that off and not have too significant a tax burden on residents of Richmond. So thank you.
Yeah, you just wait. Councillor Day, or no, Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just two questions. One came up, as was mentioned by staff, on Councillor Liu's question on agricultural land where they have septic, but they were potentially charged a sewer rate. My question is, in residential land, so non-agricultural, was there a time, or are people still charged for a sewer rate, even though they're on septic in residential? Because I remember that being a big complaint of many residents.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, one of the things that is in this report as well is right now the sanitary is split between the utility, which is the operations and maintenance portion, and there's a levy on the property tax bill for the sewer debt portion. So that is what typically we get the complaints about being double billed because it does show up in two separate places. One of the recommendations in this report is to move the debt levy off of a property tax levy and moving it into the utility, so it will only show up in one spot. And then the people that don't have sanitary service will not be charged that either.
Okay,
I believe his question was, if you don't have a sewer connection, are you charged for sewer? Wasn't that it? You got a farm, you have a septic tank, you're not connected to sewer, are you charged for sewer?
No, you're not.
Yeah, and my other part of the question was if it's not agricultural land, but that part was answered, thank you. And my second question is, a year ago, roughly today, with the atmospheric rivers, there was flooding and there was the Metro Vancouver sewer rupture. Is there anything in this, anything that we're considering today that would have caught or addressed that issue, that infrastructure failure?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, part of the debt levy is the upgrade of the Gilbert Trunk sewer. Presumably that once that project is complete, it should address issues like that Metro has.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Day.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, I'm really pleased that we're going to collect the sewer charges through the sewer bill and not the property tax. I think that's something we should have done a long time ago. It just simplifies the whole process and a lot less phone calls. And I understand it's going to save us money from reading through the report on page, I think 46. So on page 61, I'll give an example. The metered sewer rate increase will be $30.16. And then if we go to the next page on 63, it says minus $76.59. So in the end, is the taxpayer going to see a lesser increase because of us putting it through the sewer bill and not the tax bill?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, as demonstrated in this table, for a single-family dwelling, the property tax will decrease by $76.59 because we'll stop collecting that as a separate levy there. And then instead, it will be collected as part of the utility rate. So if their consumption is average, then they could expect to see an increase in their metered bill of $55.05. So it is, for that type of an average user, it would be a savings.
Oh, so there you go. So why would we not do it if it's going to actually save people money? Okay, good, thank you. Just wanted to clarify that.
Now, my last question, I think, I just want to be clear because it has been raised about the net increase or the increase for personnel. Now, the first, for our first one, which was water, the answer I believe was, we've already got the costs in there, we're just formalizing the positions. As I understand this one, in options 2 and 3, where we're adding a net zero net cost sewer coordinator, we're going to improve the processes, which will then pay for that person. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So it's a kind of, it's a different approach than the previous one.
Yes.
Okay. Let's go to the next one, which is, I believe, so I'm ahead of myself, I think it's flood protection.
Yes. So on page FIN 68 are the 3 options for flood protection. The first option is non-discretionary increases plus acceleration of the flood protection program as previously endorsed by council. This also includes 5 new permanent positions to deliver the accelerated program. Those positions will be paid for through the capital program as shown down below. Option 2 includes all the items in option 1, plus an additional project manager in the operations department for the dike repair program. This position would be in addition to the utility budget. And the reason for that is this would be done out of operations because maintenance work is traditionally not a capital expense. Option 3 includes all the options all the items in option 2, plus a $1 million transfer of drainage from the operating budget to the drainage and diking utility. Historically, all of the drainage operations and maintenance has been in the operating budget. Since 2021, there has been a gradual transfer of those funds away from the operating budget into the utility budget, and this is a continuation of that. So this $1 million that's being added to the utility budget would be reduced from the operating budget.
Okay. Questions, Councillor Liu? Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor McNulty, then Councillor Liu.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. You partially answered my question. I have a concern with regard to, we can't blame Metro Vancouver for this one, I guess. This is ours. It says today 3.8 million has been reallocated to the drainage utility budget. That's a relatively small amount considering the aggressiveness of which we want to embellish towards diking. Does this option 3 beef it up to anything, or does it just maintain? Is it sort of maintain annual as opposed to beefing it up to reduce that total time?
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, all of the options include acceleration to a $30 million roughly revenue by 2032 to support a 50-year implementation of the flood protection program.
But how much do we spend each year on diking now?
Through the chair, the entire capital program right now is 10 million.
10 million.
And that's split between the diking and the other drainage.
So if we have
projects.
10 million a year, and if we go to 2030, whatever, it's quite a bit of money.
Through the chair.
And how do we get it? Are we bringing that in, if you wish, to do so?
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, the current plan is to continue raising the flood protection fees up to $30 million per year. In addition to that, we will be seeking senior government funding, grant funding opportunities. One of the reasons that the 50-year timeframe was recommended is so that we can leverage our funding against senior government funding and to try to reduce the overall burden on Richmond's taxpayers.
Well, let's hope we're successful in that. Obviously, it's aggressive. The 5 positions you mentioned earlier, at least I thought I heard you, you said these are brand-new positions. There's nobody working in any of these areas now that roll over into here.
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, that's correct.
So we'll have our own people, okay. All right, I just hope your calculations are correct in option 3. I'll support what staff are doing, because I think that's one thing we keep hearing, you know, are dikes safe anytime we have high tide or increased freshet or whatever, so it's a good report. As I say, I'd like to see us be as aggressive as we can. So there will be no more funds coming from the operational budget now. It'll all be on the utility budget for this.
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, there will still be a roughly $2.6 million remaining, and we will look at to transfer those remaining funds over the next couple of years.
And what would that money be for, the 2.6?
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, it's for the maintenance. Suzanne might be able to better answer that
Through the
question.
chair to Councillor McNulty, it is for the operations and maintenance, so it would be our ditch cleaning program and all of those types of activities that we do to maintain our drainage infrastructure, clear blockages, that type of thing.
Okay. And this will be an add-on to the utilities bill, correct? And I suggest we have a line making sure that people understand what it is. And now, Your Worship, I'd also suggest when the utility bill goes out, a note go out to let the taxpayer know that we are actively addressing with supportive levels of government and the idea of flood protection for Richmond. I think it's very important. I take it under advisement. I don't want to make a motion. I think staff can do that, but I think finance staff could also make sure that's there. Thank you.
So the 5 positions, we will see those positions in the capital budget that's coming through?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that's correct.
And it'll be identified as such?
Through the chair, or Mr. Mayor, the salaries are actually built into the utility budget. The funding is coming from the capital budget, which is ultimately funded by the transfer to reserves, which also comes from this budget. So it is embedded in this flood protection utility already with this recommended option.
Yeah, but the money is coming from the capital budget, so we have to approve it coming from the capital budget to this budget.
That's correct, yes.
So we'll see it.
You will see the capital projects on the capital, but not a specific salary position.
I think we request that.
Okay. All right. We'll go to Councillor Liu.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for this again. So the project manager dike repair programs, would this be the person who would then be in charge of making sure trees get removed before they become sort of significant and create problems with the diking and problems with the public when it comes time to remove them?
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, yes, that would be one of their duties. One of the issues that we've run into is that the approvals for maintenance operations has become very onerous and very time-consuming. So that is going to be the primary duty of this person, is to get all of the project approvals in place so that the maintenance operations can actually happen.
Okay. And then who is in charge of communication in all of this?
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, for the flood protection, it's a corporate effort. Engineering has a big part of it. Public Works plays a big part. Communications group is involved. We also talk to emergency programs and parks. As far as the long-term planning, we're finishing up our consultation for Dike Master Plan Phase 4. So that will be coming to council later on for endorsement and finalization as well.
Okay. And then just to clarify, so the flood protection pays for Lulu Island. Does it also pay for Sea Island, or Sea Island is there done by the airport?
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, we have a small segment on Sea Island. Most of Sea Island is the responsibility of the airport. The Richmond's responsibility is generally the area by BC IT campus.
Okay, so Burkeville is charged through us, and we maintain sort of a percentage-wise, I suppose, of Sea Island. Now, are we in conversation with YVR on their plan? Like, are they on a 50-year plan, or are they on a 20-year? Like, are they on the same plan we are, or we're just gonna have a raised dike in front of BCIT and?
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, YVR is advancing their plans. I'm not 100% certain what their timeframe is, but they have been doing dike upgrades over the last few years.
Okay, how do we make sure that we're aligned with them?
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, we'll continue to reach out to them. We do have discussions with them. I'm just not familiar off the top of my head on what their actual plans are at this moment.
Okay, maybe we should make a referral to connect this conversation with our YVR
Why don't we
representative?
just ask for a memo, if you could just check that out?
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Heed.
Through the chair, I just want to make a comment because I think this is of significant importance, and Councillor McNulty and Councillor Liu alluded to this, is the explanation to the public, the communication, and I think that is going to be so critical going forward. All we're hearing from people very concerned with climate change, what happened out in the valley, what could happen to us here in Richmond. So I'm thinking whatever effort we can get to get staff and everyone involved in it, and some type of information through to the public, it's very important. My question through the chair is in relation to senior governments. We know there's a political avenue here, but is there another avenue here to get that the funding needed to make sure that we're protected here in Richmond, whether it be through the provincial government or the federal government? Do they have particular programs going forward that we can utilize? Because they're very concerned, in my understanding from what I'm reading, they're very concerned about what is going to take place here in British Columbia, and a lot of the bureaucrats and politicians at the higher level of governments are concerned about what's going to happen in the region.
Through the chair to Councillor Heed, there are various competitive grant funds that are available through provincial and federal governments. We have been engaged with them through our intergovernmental department and also through other staff contacts. What we have been advocating for is more dedicated funding streams. Right now, the province is doing BC flood strategy, and that is one of the items that Richmond, along with a lot of other municipalities, are going to be are pushing for, is to get away from the competitive grant-funded opportunities and try to have a more dedicated funding stream for flood protection provincially.
Through the chair, do we have any forecast on that, any assumptions? Because, you know, when I look at these options, there's about a 9% difference between option 1 going to option 3, which is your recommendation. Do we have any indication at all, Mary, even, or Chair, at your level of where this is on their radar, or do we have any forecasts at what we could expect?
In terms of senior government?
Yes.
I can tell you it's very much on their radar, especially with the debacle that happened a year ago out in the valley. It's being examined by all levels, you know, from Metro Vancouver to the province, to the feds. And you know, we have been successful in obtaining some very significant funding in the last just short while, frankly. Like, look at the South Dike, right from Gilbert right to number 4 road type of thing. That's the kind of thing we've been getting funding for in the tens of millions of dollars. So your point is well taken, that we cannot let off the pressure at all. And frankly, if I can editorialize, my big fear, and I think staff shares this, that with the wider attention being paid to this, the province sets up some kind of funding strategy, because we're way ahead, and it's going to slow us down. That's one of the big challenges that we have, is that those who haven't been paying attention to this, like Richmond has, are going to spread out whatever the money is, and will be slowed down considerably. So we just can't let it happen. Every time we go to Victoria, every time we go to UBC, it's always on the radar, and we always have meetings on it. Would you agree?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Councillor Day.
Thank you. This interesting point that you point out, Mayor Brody, is we have received significant amounts of money for diking improvements over the years, and maybe we won't be as, top of the list as we have been in the past. So when I was looking at these 5 positions that are going to be created, and as I went back to page FIN 65, we have a senior project manager, 2 project coordinators, 2 environmental coordinators, and a real estate negotiator. Seems like sort of management heavy. And given that we have a real estate department with Mr. Kirk, do we truly need all 5 of these if we don't get funding for future projects?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, all 5 positions are required to implement the program. In particular, the real estate negotiator will be key because we've done most of the easier, quote unquote, easier upgrades where there's not a lot of property impacts. As we start to go forward with more of the dike upgrades, there's going to be significant property impacts to a large number of landowners. Unfortunately, those discussions are fairly time consuming. And like I said, there is a large number of properties. If it was a couple of properties, the real estate department could absorb that workload. However, the number of properties we're talking about, it will require additional resources.
So if I understand you correctly, tell me if I'm wrong, these basically managerial positions would help us get funding in the future because we're already set up for it.
Through the chair to Councillor Day, the positions...
Page 65.
So the project coordinators, none of these positions are actual manager positions.
Excuse me. I think the GM wants to weigh in on this.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. And yet, perhaps Mr. Chan was going to say the same thing. But yes, our general model for the whole capital program is we use project managers to do all the procurement, all the tendering, to do all the analysis for services from the private sector or city forces, procuring the design work, doing all the planning. So it's a huge amount of work. And as Mr. Chan's indicated previously, there is a very large increasing burden on the environmental approvals, hence the environmental coordinator. So every time we're doing work on a dike or improving it, there's the foreshore, there's riparian areas on the inland side, all requiring approvals from the Ministry of Environment and DFO. So there's an awful lot of work there that's required to deliver the millions of dollars of capital we have to put in the ground. And so when we're increasing the program from 10 million a year to 30 million a year, these are the staff we require to deliver that. By way of example, I mean, and these staff are dedicated to delivering the efforts that are required to build those capital works. If for sake of argument, you removed your entire capital program, then we would have no need of these staff. You would lay them off. But certainly, to achieve council's direction on the accelerated program, these are absolutely necessary in terms of actually getting the projects built, constructed, and completed.
Just 2 things. It would be a lot better if he was louder because he's hard to hear. So basically, because of the requirements put on by the federal and provincial government, we have to have these positions in order to be able to be successful in the bids, basically.
To be able to deliver them effectively and make sure we're getting designs done so that the contractors we hire are actually delivering value for the city. In addition, yes, these are the same people that will be directed to the provincial and federal governments to try to access the grant funding to support those projects.
Okay, and when we approved the diking plan, we had the option of going from, maybe Councilor Wolf can help me, was it from 30 years to 50 year? 50 year to 30 year? And it wasn't any extra cost. Will hiring these positions and spending these extra expenditures have the ability, because it was already in the report previously, I think it was last spring, that we could go to a 30-year model instead of a 50-year model. Would this help us get there?
Through your worship to Councilor Day, certainly we would probably need more staff than this to accelerate it further. And it is a continual process. Certainly, his worship mentioned the project, the successful project raised in the dike between Three Road and Gilbert. If you look at the full scope of a project like that, from council approval of the funding through to completion, it's probably in excess of 5 years. So these larger projects take a long time, and as we accelerate that, we're leaning on the private sector, the consultants to design the work and the contractors to deliver it. So their resources become limited too. But as we ramp up the whole program over time, they can respond to that and ramp up their ability to deliver service. So it's a pretty complex, faceted piece of machinery. To bring that all together, we can't instantly ramp up production of new dikes, over the course of a year or two. But certainly, with council's direction on the accelerated program, when we get out 5 years from now, 10 years, we can take stock and see how successful we've been. And if we need to step on the gas further, certainly that would be the option.
All right, thank you.
All right, let's go to the fourth area, the solid waste and recycling. Suzanne, is that you?
Mr. Chair, these services are basically those that we provide to the residents of Richmond for all their garbage and recycling collection services and the recycling depot that we offer. The items under option 1 are all those base salary increases or contract increases that are obligations of the city. So these are the minimal that are necessary to maintain the current service levels. The option 2 includes all the costs under option 1, plus a request to have a permanent, regular full-time role to handle the Green Ambassador program. We have had that in place since 2010, but it's been difficult as our services and programs and demands on our staff have grown to be able to continue to maintain that program. We also want to be able to grow that, to do more youth outreach and engagement, and there's more demand for our additional outreach programs that this position would do in addition to other services and programs that we offer. This is our recommended option under this particular area of the budget, just recognizing all the other requests for positions that have been presented. We did want to outline option 3. This was to do with the single-use plastics bylaw that was introduced. We did identify to council that we would need additional positions for this, and this presents what was originally envisioned. That single-use plastics bylaw did come into effect September 27th of this year. We feel we can continue to monitor that for another year before presenting potentially those positions in the future. We also want to monitor what the federal and provincial actions are going to be on the whole issue of plastics. So we are just recommending the 1 additional position under option 2.
All right, Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Your Worship. Question, then a couple comments. So my question is the 2 positions that are outlined in option 3 on Fin 70 or on page 71 in more detail. It says that on the second last paragraph on Fin 71 that one of them is a temporary, is placed on temporary basis right now, and the other is consulting services. So that means we're already paying for these 2 positions.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, that is correct.
Okay, thanks. So I would like to, when time comes up, to actually ask for council support on option 3. A couple, if I can speak to it now, some of the reasons why I think that is the way to go. One was just outlined by staff. We're already paying for them, and if these are contracted workers, let's get them in-house, because this is a commitment that we've made as a council, and it's in our strategic planning in many ways. We just approved circular economy strategies. Some of my observations, I have a real small boat and it takes me a long time to go around the island. And when I do, I stop on the shore wherever there's opportunity. And the night market, one area, every time I go by there, I stop and you can see that parking lot and it just spills out debris and stuff that flows out. A lot of single-use stuff gets sold there and where it makes its way into the water. Lots of our trails, lots of developments are happening right on the shoreline. And you see when the wind is blowing, sheets of plastic, insulation, all that stuff blowing out into the water. We have landfills right adjacent to the river. We have canals draining to the river. If you look on in this report on page Fin 77, it talks about single-family homes. How many of them, what size bins, cart size do they have? Well, 78% of single-family homes have the second largest of the 4 sizes. 78% of people have that big bin. For me, I have the smallest bin, and only 4% of single-family houses do. I think that's the most important step that individuals can take because you're physically limited how much you can throw out. So you right away have to be more conscious when you're buying the stuff and when you're using the stuff. So I think there needs to be a higher hit to the cost of the way business is being done in Richmond. We also, I think, are in pilot phases of doing commercial recycling And that's been for all of these years, decades, not been a requirement, and there's just been endless amounts of good recyclable stuff, reusable stuff going into the biggest bins that get emptied every week, and they're overflowing and they're not locked, and the stuff spills all over our parks and streets. And I think having these two staff who are committed long-term city workers, they will take more on the waste audit component that is necessary. The waste audit is where you look in to see where single-use products still are being used, and you target and you try and step those back and educate. So I'm adamant that we take option 3.
Mr. Chair, if I can just clarify as well, we are currently paying for those positions. Cost is coming to pay for those positions from our sanitation recycling provision account. So there is no impact to the taxpayer for those positions now because they're being offset from the provision. Whereas under option 3, that is why there was a rate increase, because it actually formalizes those two positions as being generated by the rates that are charged to residents and not offset from provision, just to clarify.
So if we go to option 3 for this one, is that FIN 77? Is that what it's telling us?
Mr. Chair, yes. If option 3 was selected by committee, it would be the amount shown in table 15, which would be, instead of an increase under option 2 for the average single-family home of $9.35, it would be an increase of $13.15.
All right, anybody else wanting to speak on this one? Okay, any other comments on this before we
Mr.
deal
Chair,
with it?
just one point of clarification on page FIN 75. We discussed the water trash skimmer pilot project. I just wanted to clarify because the report does indicate that we would be installing that trash skimmer in the 4th quarter this year at Stephen Harbor Authority. We've since learned from the vendor that they do not recommend we put it in the winter, and actually we should remove it in the winter. So we won't be able to install that until the first part of the 2nd quarter of 2023, because we don't want to put the unit in the water and then have it freeze. So just to clarify that.
Now, if we approve these various increases in personnel, is this it for a while? I mean, next year, are we going to see the same thing?
Mr. Chair, if I may add, what we've typically done over the years, because of the significant impact of Metro Vancouver increases, we typically have held back from requesting positions that are necessary. I would say a lot of what we've requested here today does catch us up quite well. I would expect we wouldn't see this many in future years, maybe 2 to 3 in future years from our projections.
When was the last time you had 2 to 3 increase? Not for a long time.
Mr. Chair, it was last year we requested 2 new positions, I believe, in the utility budget.
I just, from my point of view, I don't want staff to get the wrong idea that this is what we expect every year. Because to me, this is a real exception, no matter which way, you know, regardless of this last one, whether we go to option 2 or 3. So from my point of view, I hope staff hears that. I see nodding heads, so apparently they have.
We hear you. Understood.
And you won't disappoint us when you don't come with 2 to 3 next year. Okay, I think what we should do, I think we should ask for a motion. We don't need a motion, the recommendation number 2, because we've already passed that change. But in number 1, my suggestion is that we put it on the floor as written, and then I expect there'll be some amending and various things, but. So it's moved and seconded as written. So my guess is, Councillor Wolf, you probably want to have that amended for the last one.
Yes, to option 3 for the solid waste recycling.
Okay, so it's drainage. Okay, so the amendment is to have option 3 for solid waste. Is it seconded? I heard second from somebody. Okay, so that's, option 3 is, so we're on the, we're on the amendment. Anyone want to speak to the amendment? I think we've heard the case for it. Councilor McNulty?
Yeah, I just want to make sure if we go to, consider option 3, that it fits in with staff's plans as they see fit. And we're not going to have yet another staff member, whatever, because it makes it an aggressive program. Not that I disagree with the intent of it, that's all. Because we're talking, instead of 2.7, we're talking 4.3, we're talking, what, $5 and, or $3 and 80 cents difference. And in the total amount, we're talking another 30 cents on 451 per day, which would be about $4.80 a day. It's not really that significant if it gets us to where we want.
All right, Councilor Gillanders,
Thank you, Mayor Brody.
on the amendment only.
On the amendment only, yes. Question about that. As you were saying, through the chair to staff, that previously we have been paying for those positions as subcontractors, and it's coming out of the other fund. So if we did move to option 3 and then they become salaried employees, that other cost would go down in the other fund, and so would that reduce our cost to a taxpayer in that other section?
Through the chair to Councillor Glanders, it actually is an increase to residents because we are not drawing from our provision funding we would no longer be drawing from that provision funding to offset the cost of those positions, which is now means they are formal positions, so it is an extra cost.
We could move to do a cost offset though?
Mr. Chair, that is an option for council
if people were concerned about the amount of the increase, but like Mr. McNulty, Councilor McNulty said, it's not too significant, so. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Councilor Liu.
Thank you. To clarify again with staff, so right now this is going against revenue from operations, money that's coming in through garbage recycling, that provision. So if it moves over into the ratepayer, so it goes directly onto the taxpayer, then that excess revenue just stays in the provision and could be carried forward then, so that when we do get slammed later, or not, because it's a different category, because this is solid waste and it wouldn't then say offset our liquid waste.
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, it is a separate provision, and for example, we use that provision to do the significant upgrade to the recycling depot. So it would be for those types of capital expenditures that we would generally use those, or if we did another significant rollout of a new program that involved capital expenditures such as cart purchases that we've done in the past. That's typically what we've used that funding for and for pilot programs.
Okay, how much is in the provision right now, do we know?
Do you know, Melissa, off the top? Not off the top, so it is in the report. Find it, it's in here somewhere.
Through the chair on Fin 73, the provision has a balance of 5.2 million.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you, and through the chair. Well, just to clarify, I thought I read in here somewhere that option 2 was being recommended because you wanted time to assess different legislation from provincial and federal levels. But the fact is, the positions in option 3 are still positions that are going to, in all likelihood, be recommended at the point that you have assessed those programs. So it's not anything to do with the worthiness of the positions themselves. It's just a timing issue, correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, that is correct. We do want to see what the federal action is going to do, but we consider that these are positions that will still be required going forward.
Right, okay.
Councillor Day.
Thank you very much, Mayor Brody. Speaking to the amendment, I'm going to support it because I think that we're already doing it, and we might as well make it a permanent position so that we can move forward, because as we know from all the awards in our cabinets that we're getting it right. And we are an example to not just other cities, but the province and the feds. So I think this is a very good suggestion and I'll be supporting it.
All right, let's call the question then on the amendment. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Counselor Liu, Counselor Au opposed. All right, so we're back on the main motion. Can we call the question then? So the change is, it's option 3 for solid waste, not option 2. So we'll call the question on the entire budget. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? It is carried with Counselor Au opposed. All right. And that is it for finance. May I have a motion to adjourn? All right, now I'll call to order the closed GP. May I have a motion on closure compliance in the agenda? Moved.